All right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself or leading others. I'm John Laurito, your host today and always. Here with a great guest. I'm very excited to have Paul Haines with me. I've gotten an opportunity to meet Paul over the last few months, and always, every time we talk, super impressed with his perspective, his leadership. So, Paul, thrilled to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you. Very, very excited to be here. And by the way, I'm a frequent listener of your podcast, so I'm a little bit of a fan as well.
All right, I love it. Okay, well now you got an opportunity to be the star. So we'll turn the tables a little, and you'll get a chance to enlighten other people on some of the things that you think about with leadership. So. Just real briefly, you've, I know, had lots of success in leadership roles. You've spent your career in finance and various roles. You've worked with a lot of different organizations. You've influenced a lot of people. What is in your experience, in your opinion, what are some of the most important traits of today's, or even more apt, tomorrow's leader? What does that look like?
Well, I think one of the most important things, and it's a lesson that I learned very, very early in life. I mean, I'm talking about when I was 19, 20 years old, and had a chance to work with Lynn Robbins, who was, if you're not familiar with that name, he was one of the founders of Franklin Covey. So, he knows a little bit about leadership and organization.
I remember Franklin Covey. I remember the planners. Yeah.
Well, I'll admit I still use a planner to this day, many, many years later.
Yeah.
But one of the important things, because if you have a chance to spend some time with somebody like that, it's always like, well, what's one of the most important lessons in life? And one of the most important things that he shared about a leader is the principle of 100% responsibility and always owning your results. And I thought about that, right? Because, it's like in college, if I'm getting a C in a particular class, the tendency is to always, all right, well, here's why I got that C. Like, the professor wasn't that good. I was having trouble sleeping. I mean, it's easy to make excuses, but at the end of the day, it doesn't change the grade. I still got that C. And so as it applies to business, I think what's important is always, recognizing that fact and owning your results. And I tell my team all the time, it's okay if we fail, just own it. What did we learn from it? What will we do different before? And, I think in my own career, just to give a little background, I'm now regional vice president at Lincoln Investment, which is a leadership role. I've worked as a managing director at some large banks. I don't say this to humble brag in any way, but just to add some credibility, that I've been able to work my way up in the industry in a relative short period of time. Early in my career, I don't think I always hoped this would happen, but certainly I had a couple false starts. I mean, when I first got into the industry, I struggled. I mean, firms
as
always
an advisor, as a leader, or both.
As an advisor.
Okay.
And applying this principle, being at the bottom of the leaderboard and saying, okay, hold on a second. There's some other people that are good at this industry.
Yeah.
What am I doing different? Or what do I need to do different in order to improve my situation? And really it was recognizing maybe I'm not very good at selling things, but I'm very good at advising and leading people to their options. So adopting a complete different approach, which for me was financial planning over, more selling approach.
Well, it's interesting too.
Made a big change.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up a great point, because I think a lot of people get frustrated, whether it's their first leadership role or their first role in anything, and they're not good at it. They feel like, okay, I'm destined to not be great at this. I actually, and I struggled myself as a first-year advisor. I almost failed out of the business. But I always looked at that and I'm like, thank God that happened, because it made me a better leader of other people, because I had to be conscious of what went into being a better advisor and turning the business around. I had to learn as a leader how to be a better leader. I think sometimes people, when they just get off to a great start, they never have anything but success. They almost are not conscious of what goes into being successful as a leader or as an advisor or any type of role. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. When it doesn't come easy, you're very intentional about what you're doing, and certainly need to focus on, all right, what are the steps that made me successful, and then once you're self-aware and can recognize that, it's much easier to take those same steps and apply them
Yeah.
to helping coach someone else, or recognizing some of the
Yeah.
symptoms of what they need to do to improve.
Now, have you've I'm sure had opportunities to work with great leaders, people that have influenced you very positively, and also probably some bad leaders. Do you think you learn more from great leaders or from bad leaders on what not to do, or great leaders on what to do?
Well, definitely have learned more from the great leaders. On the flip side, not so much the bad leaders, but I will say I've learned more from my failures
Okay.
or
Good.
business I did not win than I did from business that I did win, because it's always important to self-assess and say, again,
Yeah.
going back to what I said earlier about the 100% responsibility, it's like, okay, what went wrong?
Yeah.
What do I need to do different? How can I improve the next time? What kept me from, being successful in this particular instance? And
Mhm.
being able to be honest and then not repeat that mistake. Yeah, I think back to some of those moments, and it's like, all right, I
Yeah.
lost the battle, but I definitely won the war. So
Yeah.
I do love to learn from the great leaders, but yeah, when it comes to my own
Mhm.
personal situation, I've definitely learned more from my failures than my successes.
So let me ask you what might be a tough question, but I know it's a question that a lot of leaders have. You got a lot of leaders that are listening out there, and we got leaders audience in 66 countries out there that listen to this, and all different levels of leadership. You got some early on leaders, you got some people, CEOs of companies. One of the very common questions that I get is around the topic of ownership. It's one thing for you to take ownership, and sometimes that's hard because we all don't necessarily naturally have a highest level of ownership. It's easy for us to rationalize stuff, and that's just human nature. But the question oftentimes is, okay, how do I develop a team? How do I develop that in the culture of my organization, this ultra high level of ownership? You hear about the Navy SEALs that do such a phenomenal job of this, and other organizations. What do you tell leaders that might ask you that question, and you've done it? How do you do that? How do you breed that kind of environment?
I think it's very important on a individual level to really understand what motivates someone. So one of the things that I do with my team is just a really simple mental exercise, and I use the example of floating on like a raft in the middle of the ocean. I'm like, what's your motivation to really try hard, to row as hard as you can, to exert all your energy? Well, there really isn't a whole lot, unless out in the distance you see that remote island and you say, now I have something that I can row to. And you're going to do everything to get to that island. And then as you get closer to that island, I often say, now with a little bit different perspective over in the horizon, there may be an even bigger, better, more lush island behind that. And so, as I talk to my team all the time, I'm always asking them, and the answer does change. But what is the island that you're rowing to? And not surprisingly, I think from an organizational standpoint, you start to get some consistency in the answers, and so you're able to make some organizational changes, and
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the people you work with look at you and say, "You did that because of me, didn't you? You
Mm-hmm.
made that change, you made that investment because of me." And it's like, yep.
Yeah.
but that feedback is really crucial and important. So
Yeah.
I always like to ask people and be very supportive of them. What I mean by that is I've had some conversations with individuals, and I came to find out that their island wasn't necessarily in a career path that benefited me, that was part of my line of business or my organization. But being able to work with them to realize their dreams, maybe even do a different career. I mean, you think about the benefit to that.
Mm-hmm.
One, you're really helping somebody. We only have one life to live, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're really helping somebody. They're going to be motivated. You're creating a champion for your organization, your business. But two, it really saves you some logistical problems, because that's somebody who's willing to work with you while you focus on their succession plan
Yeah.
and do some other things. So
Yeah.
rather than being caught off guard or surprised. So
Mm.
sometimes
Mm-hmm.
and it's very rare, by the way. There's definitely more benefits to it, but sometimes the answer surprises you. But if you don't have the hearts and mind of
Mm-hmm.
everyone,
Mm-hmm.
then they're kind of in the way of someone who would be able to give you that full effort. And so I think it's
Yeah.
important to first understand what it is that motivates them, and then yes, you can create a strategic plan off of that.
Well, and that's such a great point, because I think, there's so many leaders out there that they're so myopic on, okay, here's where we're going, and I got to get everybody, rowing that boat in that same direction, no pun intended, but and that's critical to the mission of the organization. But at the same point, leaders sometimes fail to take the time to understand what's important to their people. And that's where I find the breakdown. And the best leaders I've seen just do such a great job. They understand, I've talked a lot about the fact that to attract and keep A players in your organization, you really need three things. You need to help them. They need to be growing. They need to be making an impact, and not just any impact, but as big of an impact as they know they can make and want to make. And lastly, they have to feel valued in that organization. If one of those three things is not there, you run the risk of losing that top player, or not gaining that top player. But I often ask leaders, I'm like, okay, well, what does growth mean to this person? What do they want to do to grow? What does that look like? And they don't know. And it's an easy thing to lose sight of. I'm not going to necessarily know unless I ask the questions. Hey, Paul, what's important to you? We're sitting here 3 years from now and things are great and you're super happy with what you've accomplished. What's happened? What does it look like? And that simple step can really open up big doors and help a leader help that person. And to your point, sometimes where they want to go is not possible within the organization. And the best thing you can do is help them find and get on a different path. But that's the right decision, and that's the right leadership. No, great point. Yeah. So what about now? We're in obviously crazy times, getting out of pandemic. For those people that might be watching this at different time, we're in May of 2021. Hopefully, with the good signs ahead with getting out of the pandemic, but you've also got the people that it's changed, right? We've kind of gotten used to now this whole new norm, which has been living in life and business inside pandemic. Now getting out of it, how does a great leader help people go through change? Because that's also a big challenge for leaders at any level in any organization.
Definitely. I mean, I think with any change, you always have to start with a clear and compelling why. All right. What you've done has been extremely successful and it has worked so well. But going forward, we're going to try and help nudge you in this direction, and here's why. And there's a very compelling reason. And I like to say that compelling reason really has to have two parts. But one of those parts better be backed by data and science, because you're going to have those skeptics out there. Now, there's always the anecdotal reasons as well, but if you can marry the two, the anecdotal with the analytical, the data and the science, and really create a compelling why, a lot of people will be motivated to do that. I think the other thing that's important is with every organization, you need to find some early champions for that change, and somebody that's going to go out there and really model and show, all right, here's how the change can be done. Here's what we learned from it. Here's what we wouldn't repeat. But, more than anything, look at how successful we are based on the fact that we've implemented these changes. And then everyone else will kind of stand up a little bit and say, all right, I want to do more than that. I hear what you're saying. There's proof of concept, and these aren't just numbers that you gave us. So I think those two things, the compelling why and those early adopters and champions is
that's a good point. There are always those people that are willing to take the leap. And those are the ones that, if you get some success and they have some success, there's always other people just waiting and watching and saying, okay, let me see how they handle it. Let me see what happens first. Let them go through the door first, and then I will follow. So, I appreciate what you're saying. Great leaders understand that. They leverage that. They work with that group. They help develop that group, get them victories, and then help move, the rest of the people. Yeah, definitely. So what about that leader that's coming up kind of, or let me rephrase it, that person that wants to become a leader, and leadership is not necessarily, it's not a title, it's not a position. It's really gaining influence and being able to have influence in different groups or environments or settings. So you've got a lot of people that might be listening that are saying, how do I go from being an advisor or that first level and first get into that next step. Talk to us a little bit about that. What does influence look like? How do you gain that? And what would be your advice to somebody in terms of, okay, you want to get into it and maybe get into a formal role of leadership? What do you do?
This is a great question. I mean, I am in a leadership role right now. It's something I always wanted to do. My plan all along was, all right, let me. So I'm in the investment industry, financial advisor industry, be the best financial advisor I possibly can. And then that will give me some of the credibility, right? So that was my plan. But now with hindsight, I would say there's a couple things that are probably more important than being a successful financial advisor to get into this. One is, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, 100% be responsible for your results and be willing to try some different things, but really assess and own your success for good and for bad, because you're going to learn a lot from that. And you're going to, in your practice, you're going to have a laboratory to see what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Second, I think to put yourself out there and get out of your comfort zone is the most important thing. I mean, being able to get in front of a group and be persuasive, well, I promise you, you don't suddenly get the job and figure out how to do that. No, I mean, I look back and really it was signing up for each and every speaking engagement I could be a part of. Mm-hmm. Standing in front of, I remember standing in front of a Rotary group, and I'm standing in front of all financial advisors and bankers, and I'm talking about why they should do their financial planning. And I'm like, these are my competition. They could care less. All these people want to see me fail. But yet I have to go up there because there's the person who asked me to speak is watching, and I want to, represent really, really well. So,
and it was uncomfortable, right? That was probably didn't feel so good, did it?
Yeah.
First time?
I mean, delivering a workshop and having all technical problems go bad. And mm-hmm. It's like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. But how do you work through those things are very, very important. And I think just being as visible and giving yourself experiences that will be relevant to a manager or a leadership role is huge. Raising your hand, volunteering to lead teams, even if it's a volunteer experience. I will tell you, as a manager right now, I love it when my financial advisors say, hey, Paul, do you mind if I lead this initiative? I actually think I have some great ideas. And it's like, well, let me talk you through this. So I make sure that it's mm-hmm. whatever the output is consistent with what we want our brand to be. Mm-hmm. But those people, bless them, man. I love them. And I definitely want to showcase those opportunities for them.
Yeah. I love that. I love that point. I mean, I've always said I'd rather slow somebody down than speed them up. I'd rather have people that are wanting to take more responsibility, raise their hand and try something. And so many times we get stuck in our own head. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid to give that presentation because we don't know what's going to happen and am I going to botch it? We're afraid to take on that new project or that new responsibility, or even raise my hand to say, hey, I think I could do this, because we're afraid of the rejection or somebody saying no. When in reality, that's what leadership is all about. It's having the guts to do that and step outside your comfort zone, and also realize, listen, failure is going to be part of it. I mean, I remember being petrified to speak in front of groups. I've told the story. I ran off a stage of 70 people because I had a panic attack. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was the biggest flop of my entire life. But that helped me, as I look back, gain confidence and over time become able to do it successfully. But most leaders, most people coming up don't realize that, hey, part of growth, part of being a leader is going through the growth and stepping outside your comfort zone to do that. How about in terms of personal life? I mean, how does leadership impact you or anybody else outside of a work setting? I mean, whether it's family, whether it's hobbies, whether it's pleasure, whether it's spiritual, whatever it is, how does that tie in?
Well, I think, especially when it comes to family, modeling some of the things that I just talked about, right? So there's 3 things with my kids, and I feel like I'm completely repeating myself, but again, you're 100% responsible for your results. Just be upfront. Let's talk through some of your failures when they occur, to know what you could do different the next time. And it is okay. I want you to go out there, and I want you to put yourself out there in uncomfortable situations. And I think that's the other thing is extending opportunities to other people. I've had, in many volunteer organizations, it's always, well, Paul knows how to public speak and Paul knows how to be a leader. And, it's like people will push you to the front. And sometimes it's like, well, but then there's this person over here that really wants that opportunity and they want to do that. And so much more impactful than me delivering it is actually working with somebody, coaching them, saying, this is my formula. This is how I found that I can be successful, and then training them up so that I can be more of a support role. Because busy people, it's hard to say yes to everything, but at the same time, you want to make a difference in the world. So it is important to be able to empower others.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I think in a personal life, as it relates to business, that I think is important is, okay, life is hard. It's not fair. So when something goes wrong, one of the things that I know I appreciate is when one of my employees comes to me and says, all right, we have a problem, but here's some solutions that I've considered. And I thought about the difference between that and we have a problem, we need you to solve this. And as I approach, my supervisors, it's always like, all right, first of all, I don't want to be the problem guy, right? Like there's always something wrong. Let's just save my face time when, I've got a real issue. I need to work through this, because they're like, wow, Paul never complains about anything or brings anything to our attention. This must be important. And then always backing it up with, but here's some things I want you to consider as a possible solution. I'm happy with whatever you decide, but I just wanted to let you know I've given this some thought as to some ways we can correct that. I think that's important as well. So
mm-hmm.
I love what you said when you answered the question. There's so many different ways to mirror what we do in our professional lives with our personal lives. And mm-hmm. I know it's hard raising kids, but I want to empower them with those tools.
Absolutely. Well, I think about how much, and people have said a lot of times, well, I'm not a leader, or how do leadership skills help me? And my answer is always, you are a leader. Everybody is a leader, whether you realize it or not. Unless you truly have no control over what you do or say, then you are a leader, because you're leading yourself. And you are often the toughest person that you will ever have to lead. And most people find that. So leadership is all about helping create a different outcome, helping to change the path that you might have already been on. And it's all these things. It's helping. It's having the mental and emotional fortitude to push yourself outside the comfort zone, or to stick to something. I mean, how many people start a diet and then go off of it after a week or 2 weeks because somebody waves a piece of pizza in front of them or something, or even smaller than that. So we find most people, I think most individuals, really struggle with just leading themselves, whether it's through change, whether it's to get on a new path, whether it's to make a decision. I find people get immobilized sometimes. What do you, for those people that might be listening that are like, you know what, I just feel stuck. I feel like I can't take a step, whether it's making a decision, or they're, they might be in a relationship they know they need to get out of and they're not, they might, whatever the case is. What's your advice to somebody like that who just feels that feeling of being stuck?
Yeah. So let me go back to something I said earlier, which, it could be on a business level, it could be on a personal level, but really is what is the island that you want to row to? Because if you feel like you're stuck, you're just floating out there, right? You don't feel like you have any direction. So I want you to put that out there. Now, at the same time, I want to reference the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. If you're familiar with
great movie.
Yeah. So one of the poignant moments of that movie is when everybody's looking for the golden ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this part where there's this mad scramble where people are buying up chocolate bars and they're searching for that golden ticket. And I often have told my clients and even employees, be very careful about searching for that golden ticket and thinking that the golden ticket is gonna solve all your problems. Because what's interesting in that movie is the chocolate bar is just so readily discarded when so much enjoyment can come from eating some of the chocolate. You see what I mean here?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of enjoying that chocolate in that moment, it's like they're just filled with disappointment because they didn't find that golden ticket. So I do caution people to think, is if I could only buy a house in this neighborhood, my life will be better. That's a golden ticket. If I could only if I could only obtain this job, that's a golden ticket. If only I had married somebody different or could get married and find this person, that's a golden ticket. And so I think it's important to really appreciate some of the small things in life, but at the same time, find something and row towards it. I mean, in my own personal life, this year, my island was improving my health. I mean, you mentioned it, but it's like, all right, well, what am I going to do to get there? I know what some of my failings are. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and I'm going to hire a coach. And it's not inexpensive, by the way, to do that. But at the same time, I knew, okay, this is an investment in my health. I'm a financial planner. So I thought of it in terms of I could either put this money towards an investment portfolio, or if I can find a way to live healthier, be happier, reduce my stress, and extend the number of years I can work, this is better than any investment or stock, maybe with the exception of some of those Bitcoin stock. I'm kidding. Kidding. But that's what did it. And sure enough, it was looking at incorporating an exercise routine and doing that on a regular basis and being held accountable for it. Mm-hmm. Now it's so natural, but I needed that accountability. It was informing my entire family, especially my wife. All right, I'm going to eat a lot healthier. So, by putting it out there, if you see me reach for those ice cream cones at night, it's like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
You've committed this. And oh, by the way, my spouse would say, Paul, you're paying a lot of money to be healthy. So, I just share that as an example, and I'm happy with the results and how I feel as a result. But
I love that. Yeah. I mean, think about, and that's a great answer, because there's a lot of people that feel like they're in it by themselves. And in reality, surrounding yourself with the right people, and most of the time they're right around you anyway. They might be a spouse or children or friends or siblings or parents, and in enabling them and empowering them with the ability to help you achieve a goal, and making it public like that, I think is great. This, so the simple fact of saying, hey, I'm looking to do this and I'd love your help, whether it's let me know what your thoughts are on how to do it, or can I do it, or help me stay accountable to it. I think there's a lot of power in that. And smart people realize that that's not, because some people are like, well, I should be able to do it myself. Hey, listen, we're human. Sure. We're not always able to do everything we want by ourselves. Otherwise, we'd be robots. We need to help other people. So some people look at that as, well, that's a sign of weakness. It's not. It's a sign of strength and intelligence and community. It's leading by drawing in other people, and that's really influence. Because my guess is if you're sharing that with your wife and maybe other people, maybe they're doing it too. They're like, hey, you know what? That's a pretty good idea. Maybe I need to do that, and that might help you stay on track, as if I stay on track with you. So that's another form of influence. Yeah.
So it goes back to the common theme, which is 100% responsibility, right? Like, I've tried it before. It hasn't worked. I own that result. So I have to do something different, because what I've tried in the past just hasn't worked. Yeah.
I also like your other point about Willy Wonka and the chocolate factory. What that brought to mind is, that whole chase of the golden ticket. And, I think in the scene, they're like ripping it open. They're throwing the chocolate bars over. They're just discarding them in these great, chocolate bars. And people do forget that, you've got to be present. You've got to enjoy what's happening and the progress, that you're making. It's not perfection, but it's progress. I was playing golf recently and I got frustrated with, I just was playing horribly like I normally do. And then I snapped out of it. I'm like, I was playing with my dad, and I'm like, my dad's 86 years old. I get the privilege of being able to play with him. It's a beautiful day. We've got a beautiful course. And I just took a moment to kind of take it all in. And I'm like, it doesn't even matter how I'm playing. I'm doing something that's awesome. And it just gave me a whole different perspective. And I'm like, okay, we need to do that more. Sometimes we get caught up in, the whole achievement of, I got to do this, I got to do that. And we lose sight of the chocolate bar that's in our hands that's going to taste so great. Yeah, no golden ticket in it, but enjoy it. That's, I think, a missed opportunity for many people. Yeah.
Great example. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Well, this has been terrific. I know we're running short on time here, but I loved our conversation. You've got a lot of people out there that are listening to you, and maybe, again, like I said earlier, in all walks of life and leadership. What advice would you leave them with in terms of how to become, if they're wondering, okay, what do I need to do to become a better leader, or what perspective should I have? What advice would you give them?
It's just going to be a summary of what we talked about. One, be willing to own your results, 100% responsibility. Be accountable for every decision you make, because you're going to learn from your failures more than your successes. So I'd say that's number one. And two, what is your island, both on a business level, in your career, but also on a personal level. And when you get to that island, take a look in the horizon. You might have found something that otherwise would never have been possible had you not first achieved that first island. I mean, going back to my fitness goals, right? I mean, here's a guy that was not that in shape, who all of a sudden competed in a 600-mile race. Now, this was over multiple months, by the way, but I finished in 4th place. That means I was the 4th person out of over 200 people to hit the 600-mile.
Wow.
Like, that second island wouldn't have seemed possible if not for rowing towards that first island of just wanting to improve my health, eat healthier, reduce my stress, get into more shape. So I think, and then the third thing that I would add is, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, John, you just mentioned a great example. One of your biggest failures, probably an incredibly embarrassing moment. I would just leave this as motivation to put yourself out there and don't be afraid to fail. Mm-hmm. Your worst failures will become your best stories. Truly.
Love it.
You'll become a much more interesting person the more epic fail it is. So go out there, put yourself out there, and if it goes horribly wrong, embrace that, because now you just become a lot more interesting to people, and you're going to have a great story to share, and you're going to seem a lot more relatable.
I agree. People want to see vulnerability. They want to know. They don't want to know you're perfect, because then they can't relate to you, and nobody is like that. I love the 600-mile race. So when did you do that?
It started January. University of Utah had a special thing for one of their football players who died tragically. He had over 600 yards, and so the race was for each mile commemorating every yard that he had, and it was fun to participate in, but also in his memory, and definitely during the course, even though it was hard to get up in the mornings, you think about, kind of like you said with your dad. It's like, boy, how grateful should I be that I actually have the ability to do this, and I have the health, and I'm enjoying this wonderful day and listening to podcasts like yours, and just being able to absorb all that knowledge while I'm just out here doing something to better my health.
That's great. Now, was it biking, or what was it? Running?
It was running/walking.
Wow, that is unbelievable.
Not gonna lie, I did not run the entire thing, but every mile was achieved either from walking or running.
If you said you ran that whole thing, I'd pack it up right now. I'm gonna tap out. That's impressive. It doesn't matter if you drove 600 miles. I'd be impressed. So awesome. Well, Paul, I greatly appreciate you being here today. This has been a thrill. I hope at some point we'll have you back on the show. I know you and I will get a chance to chat a lot, of course. But for people to get a hold of you, or they want to learn a little bit more about you, you're now the RVP in the Midwest in Lincoln Investment. They can find you on LinkedIn, I know, of course, right? Is that the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes, sir. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and would love to hear from anyone and have people share their stories and just network. So.
Awesome. And we'll put all your info in the show notes and all that kind of good stuff. So thanks, my friend. I appreciate it. Great talking with you. And thanks everybody for tuning in today for a great episode of Tomorrow's Leader. I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, as always, like, subscribe, share, go down below, give 5-star review. I greatly appreciate that. And let me know your suggestions for future topics or future guests. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.